Now this is Mark chapter 3 verses 16 through to 19. And he, that's Jesus, appointed the 12, Simon, to whom he gave the name Peter, and James the son of Zebedee, and John the brother of James. To them he gave the name Boanerges, which means sons of thunder, and Andrew and Philip and Bartholomew and Matthew and Thomas, and James the son of Alphaeus, and Thaddeus, and Simon the Zealot, and Judas Iscariot, who betrayed him. These were the 12 that Jesus called, and it would seem that Jesus had gone up on the mountain, and perhaps there was a large group of the disciples who were there with him. We don't know. But out of those disciples, he then calls 12 to be with him, to preach, and to cast out demons. And these were not the only people who followed the Lord Jesus right through his death and resurrection. And then on in the book of Acts, we read later on that there were at least two, Joseph and Matthias, who'd been there right from the very beginning. And of course there were the women too. There was Mary, the mother of Jesus. There were many others, I think, who were following the Lord Jesus. But he called 12 to be with him. And we can read in through what Mark says. First of all, we know from the calling of Simon that Simon had his brother Andrew there, and it says that there was his brother, and they were fishermen. Many people say, oh, he's a rough old fisherman, but we don't know whether he was rough and coarse or whatever, but we do know that he did physical work, and that he had to pull the fish into his boat, and so he was a physical labouring man, somebody involved with a small family business. And he had his friends James and John, who Jesus nicknamed Boanerges, which means sons of thunder. And I heard a preacher saying these were the type of people who would have worn leather jackets with sons of thunder written across the back. We get the picture. These were not. These weren't people who were soft, who lived in king's palaces. These were outdoor people who worked, who earned a living doing outdoor work. They weren't like the scribes or clerks. Those are the four of them. They were the fishermen. But he chose others too. In the previous chapter we heard how Levi turned to the Lord, and he had been a tax collector. Now, some people say, well, this was Matthew, but I don't think Mark's not a numpty. He's not going to get the names wrong. And we see Matthew is named amongst these 12. But later on, we find that there's James, who's the son of Alphaeus, and it says that Levi was also the son of Alphaeus. So perhaps it was the brother of Levi who is there named as one of the 12. And we have these others, and then we have Simon the Zealot, who would have been a freedom fighter. He was part of the resistance against the Romans, and Jesus welcomed him in to be part of his men. You might have thought, well, that's a bit a bit dangerous, Jesus, but yeah, he chose him. And there must have been some interesting conversations between him and James, the son of Alphaeus, whose brother was around and who had been a tax collector on behalf of the Romans. And then finally we have Judas Iscariot, who the Lord chose. The Lord chose him to be with him, to preach, and to cast out demons. This was no accident. Mark makes it very clear, and he chose Judas Iscariot, who later betrayed him. This was no accident on behalf of the Lord Jesus. But Mark makes it clear that he chose him that he would be with him, that he would preach, that he would cast out demons. These were a mixed bag that the Lord Jesus chose to be with him. And they followed him through those years of ministry, those few years of ministry, and then finally to the cross, and then on into the book of Acts. But they were the God's choice, the choice of the Lord Jesus. It says here that he appointed them. And there would have been many, many others, I'm sure, who would have been those who followed the Lord Jesus closely through those days. But it was only these 12 who he specifically called to this particular role. And we need to be content with whatever way the Lord Jesus calls us and leads us and uses us in the future.